on microphone. I can stand pretty much anywhere. I don't need to be on this.
Cody controls it from the back.
Right. So, oh, that's lovely, even from here. So I will, is there room to tuck this in?
Sure. You can put it right here. we to live as God's beloved community? We are to have attitudes and actions of compassion and justice. How are we to live as neighbors with one another? We are to put on the garments of love and grace. Let us come before God in gratitude for all we have been given. Let us unite heart, mind, and spirit centered in hope. Let us worship with joy.
Is peace an answer, or is it a question? Is peace the absence of strife, or is it the presence of justice? Is peace the absence of noise, or the presence of a comforting tone? Is peace the absence of worry, or the presence of a friend? What color is peace? Not the colors used on institutional walls to keep the inhabitants docile. Peace is different to everyone, and different even to the same person at various stages of their journey. The peacemakers are blessed, but they look different to each of us. Praying for peace is a very personal and ephemeral act. Peace is ephemeral, but many people collect objects of ephemera. These pieces tell part of a larger history by implication. Collecting moments of peace can tell us something of what lasting peace looks like and spur us to seek more moments for our collection. Dona nobis pacem. Each Mass ends with the appeal, grant us peace. But can peace be granted? In Beethoven's Missa Solemnis, it sounds as if the petitioners are not confident of the grant. We often pray for the peace that passeth all understanding. It sure does. The act of lighting the peace candle is an act of ignition. Flame kindled in the spirit. The wicked peace is transformed into flame and smoke. Contemplating a burning candle may inspire peace, but watching fire destroy tears at the soul. So is peace an answer or a question? Rainer Maria Rilke, in Letters to a Young Poet, advised, "Don't search for the answers, which could not be given to you now, because you would not be able to live them. And the point is to live everything. Live the questions now. Perhaps then, someday far into the future, you will gradually, without even noticing it, live your way into the answer. I pray that we live peace, whichever it is."
As a prayerful response, let us say together the words Jesus taught. Tender, loving God, who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come, thy will be done, on earth as it is in heaven. Give us this day our daily bread, and forgive us our debts, as we forgive our debtors. And lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from evil. For thine is the kingdom, and the power, and the glory forever. Amen. Blessings and grace to you this day. I am so glad to welcome you into this time of worship, whether you're watching us live at 11 o'clock from wherever you are or at some other time in this week. It is good that we can gather in this virtual way. My name is Beth Hoffman Faith. I am the Minister for Congregational Care and Worship here at Plymouth Congregational Church. And again, thank you for joining us and welcome. As usual, there are some announcements. We are rapidly coming to the time where we will be again gathering in the sanctuary for worship. On November 7th, both our 9 o'clock and 11 o'clock a.m. service will be here in the sanctuary, and you are welcome to attend. How good it will be to gather together, even though we do this cautiously and hopefully. There are several protocols in which we've been asked to follow, and I would invite you to pay good attention to the letters I write weekly to the congregation, which can be found on Plymouth's website and also in our Friday email, which outlines some of the practices and procedures we will have to employ in order to worship safely together. But again, we are looking forward to this time, just 2 weeks from today, on November 7th, when both the 9 a.m. and 11 a.m. service return to the sanctuary. I want to invite you to another worship opportunity that we have begun at the beginning of October, Sundays at 5. Every Sunday evening, well, almost every Sunday, because we aren't going to gather next Sunday on the 31st, but almost every Sunday at 5 o'clock, we have worship here in the sanctuary, a contemplative service, which means there's opportunity for quiet and meditation, but each Sunday is framed around a slightly different theme. And on this particular Sunday of the month, the fourth Sunday of the month, it is our testimony service. Testimonies, transformation through stories. Everyone has a story, and every story is sacred. And we hope that as one person shares a piece of their story about how something has transformed in their life, it may have an impact on our own story and be able to invite us to kind of live more authentically in the world. I'm really delighted that our first testimonier, I'm not sure if that's the right term, but something like that, is our very own Dr. DeWayne Davis. Will be providing the testimony this evening at 5 o'clock here in the sanctuary at Plymouth. Some of you gathered with us regularly via Zoom during the clergy open door sessions in the winter and spring. This was a time we invited you to ask us questions. If you had wonderings about the church, if you just wanted to get to know your clergy a little bit better, we had a delightful time. We're bringing it back for a limited engagement, this time in person. Open Door, a conversation with clergy, will happen on Wednesday, October 27th at 10:30 a.m., Thursday, October 28th at 1 o'clock p.m., and Monday, November 1st at 6 o'clock p.m. All of them will happen in Guild Hall. We invite you to choose one of those in which to attend. This is an opportunity, again, for you to ask questions of us, but also for us to gather in a time of fellowship. We are very aware that this is a heavy time for many people. As we move into post-pandemic life, we carry with us a lot of angst and anxiety and a lot of grief for what has happened in the last 18 months. And so when we come together, perhaps we'll find a way to lighten our load a bit, or at least share with one another the concerns upon our heart. We hope that you might choose to attend. Next Sunday, October 31st, is our Stewardship Sunday. And the Plymouth Stewardship Committee is launching our 2022 annual giving campaign next weekend. The Sunday Forum that day will feature a presentation by the Stewardship Committee, so I hope you will tune in. The theme this year is Cultivate Faith, nurture connection, amplify love. There's a lot of emotive words in that, so I'm going to say it one more time. Cultivate faith, nurture connection, amplify love. And we are inviting you to reflect on all the ways Plymouth Church has impacted your life and your family, and then prayerfully consider how you might make a commitment to continue to support our work and our ministries. We show care, connection, and build faith within our congregation and in the broader community. We have had to revamp and readapt some of the things that we have always done in this time of pandemic, and you have joined us in that journey. And we look towards the future with hope. We are building a community without walls, and your financial gifts are really important to us as we move forward in faith. By making your commitment, you are stepping up to support the work at Plymouth that cultivates faith, nurtures our connection to each other, and amplifies our love and commitment to the community around us. You don't have to wait until next Sunday to offer up your gift. You can visit Plymouth's website at plymouth.org, and you will see the 2022 Annual Giving Campaign tab. And we ask that you make your commitment by clicking the Make the Commitment icon and then filling out the form. And we thank you for your support. There is so much happening inside and outside of these walls. I could stand here all morning and announce them all, but I'm not going to do that. I'm going to invite you to please visit the website, plymouth.org, or make sure to read the Friday email that comes out weekly with all kinds of information about what's happening. If you haven't yet signed up to receive that email, please contact the church office. And we continue in worship with this morning's anthem.
Good morning. We continue in our Command to Preach series, and how blessed we have been with your submissions to the clergy for this series. I am grateful to Hope Asparolini for the contribution that she offered from the letter to the Colossians. She and I had an email exchange, and Hope wrote me the other day just to give me a sense of the role this text has played in her life. She submitted Colossians 3, verses 12 through 16. And she said, "I've marked it in my Bible with 3 different dates, though I have read it many more times over the years, especially this year. It certainly is a commandment on how to live with kindness and compassion, to offer forgiveness to others, and to be thankful for my life as it unfolds. A tall order most of the time, in all honesty, yet even if not fully reached, each commandment, each word has pointed me in the right direction over and over again." What a beautiful way to set the context for us as we hear the words from the letter to the Colossians, chapter 3. "As God's chosen ones, holy and beloved, clothe yourselves with compassion, kindness, humility, meekness, and patience. Bear with one another, and if anyone has a complaint against another, forgive each other. Just as the Lord has forgiven you, so you also must forgive. Above all, clothe yourselves with love, which binds everything together in perfect harmony. And let the peace of Christ rule in your hearts, to which indeed you were called into one body, and be thankful. Let the word of Christ dwell in you richly. Teach and admonish one another in all wisdom, and with gratitude in your hearts, sing psalms, hymns, and spiritual songs to God." Will you pray with me? Speak, Lord, your servants are listening. Say a word that they may hear. Speak through these lips of clay, this weak vessel, and that the words of my mouth and the meditation of every heart will be acceptable to you. You are indeed our rock, our Redeemer, in whom we trust. Amen. A few years ago, the media theorist Douglas Rushkoff published a book describing something called narrative collapse. His thesis was that familiar and reassuring narratives have been overwhelmed by information overload. I'm sure some of us can relate. Because of too much information, because of the onslaught of globalism, and because of the instantaneous networking and information gathering through social media, we have come to the point where it is hard to tell the story of who we are and what values we share. For example, we were once in this nation all bound together around a shared narrative of American exceptionalism, in which we were all assured that individualism, hard work, frugality, capitalism, and economic striving would make all of us successful, that we would do better than our parents did. And we understood the story of America and where we fit in it. It had a logic that made sense to us. But over the years, stagnant wages, increasing poverty, a lower standard of living, and unresponsive leaders and institutions, religious, political, economic, have left many unsure and unconvinced about this thing called the American dream. And so people are now wrestling and reckoning with questions that reveal that the story has become less clear, or the story has been lost in some way. So questions like, how and where do we locate ourselves? How does the world really work? And does what we have held up as true and good about the American experiment hold up now, given what we've experienced? Ironically, that same scholar held up Christianity as an exception to narrative collapse. You see, the Christian story, through its biblical narratives, is considered one of the last most consistent narratives holding up in an information age. It is the one narrative that consistently binds its hearers and adherents together by giving them a sense of history, purpose, and destiny. I'm describing what the author said. Because that is a hopeful and flattering, but perhaps incomplete and outdated conclusion to draw about the story of Christianity, especially given the overwhelming evidence of the church's increasing institutional unpopularity, growing biblical illiteracy, and declining church attendance and participation. Maybe that story is not as clear as we assume. No, Christianity is not immune to the dangers of narrative collapse, and we need only read this letter to the Colossians to see that people of faith have had to address concerns and doubts about the faith and how things really hang together. Church leaders have had to take seriously people's desire to know how the world really works. How does God truly work? In particular, the writer of this letter to the Colossians had to reinforce the story of the Christian faith when the narrative was on the verge of collapse. Now, scholars are near certain that the writer of this letter is not the Apostle Paul, but they do suspect that the writer was taught by Paul and is steeped in Pauline thought and theology. But for our purposes, we're going to just call this writer Paul. And so this Pauline student, this Paul, who wrote the letter, has created what can arguably be described as one of the earliest Christian apologetics in defense of the faith. Now, I don't want to present to you an apologetic. However, I do want to help us recapture a story that we may be able to share with the world, and a story in which we can locate ourselves. In the cosmopolitan city of Colossae, with its pluralistic cultural and religious traditions and practices mixing and mingling, there was a wrestling and a reckoning among the people with cosmology. They wanted to know the nature of things. How does the world work? How does it all hang together? What is the philosophical foundation of our existence? What is the internal logic of God talk and spiritual matters? How do we know and understand this stuff? And on one end of the spectrum, in the Hellenistic world, theories and doctrines about the natural order of the universe were informed by nature, philosophy, and even astrology. On the other side, in the Jesus movement, the followers of Jesus, they thought the natural order of the universe is created, infused, and ordered by God, acting through Jesus Christ. And caught in the middle of these competing cosmologies were the members of the church in Colossae, who were hedging their bets and asking themselves, given all these theories and narratives on offer, do we really gamble our lives on this Christian thing? Do we really hang it all on this thing called Christianity? Do we throw in with Christian love? And as you may guess, Paul is emphatic on about which side he's on or she's on. Remember, as a student, we don't know. Declaring immediately after the introduction in this letter that Christ is the firstborn of all creation, in whom all things in heaven and earth were created, things visible and invisible, whether thrones or dominions or rulers or powers. Paul goes on to write that the fullness of God dwells within Christ, and through Christ, through his ministry, through his witness, all of humanity has been reconciled to God. So the people are united in love with God, knowing God's forgiveness and God's mystery. And so Paul is clear that they do not need to wonder where and how to locate themselves in the world. There is no need to get hung up on the philosophical or theological foundation of their existence. There is no need to lose confidence in what the project and practice of the faith mean. There should be no anxiety about their place in the world. There should be no doubt about God's love for humanity. There should be no fear about the presence of God being hidden or inaccessible. Their identity is clear and their place is secure. They are known as God's chosen people, holy and beloved. That's who they are. That's their identity. And here's the catch. That identity means something. Because God's chosen, holy, and beloved people not only have a story, they are the story. Oh, I hope you're jumping up and down watching this. I'll say it again. God's chosen, holy, and beloved people not only have a story, they are the story. How do you know, preacher? They bear that narrative in their presence and appearance. If there is a question about their lives and destiny, if there's a question about God's intention for humanity, the answer is found in how the Colossians, and yes, even we, live it out. Paul uses the word clothe. I hope you heard me emphasize that in the reading of the text. Clothe. It is a metaphorical putting on of the presence, protection, and appearance of virtues that let the world know who and whose we are. So we put on, we wear the clothes, we wear the virtues of compassion, kindness, humility, meekness, patience. That's the story we tell in our very bodies. We put that on. We bear with one another. We forgive one another. In the middle, I love it. In the middle of our complaints against each other, whether over theology, whether over finance, whether over what we hang on our walls, we bear with one another, we forgive each other, and we love each other. When we disagree about anything, when we can't get along about anything, we bear with each other, we forgive each other. And then that's how you tell the story, because someone's going to say, how are those people over there loving each other? Paul goes on to say, we let the peace of Christ rule in our hearts, to which we are called into one body. See, some people get hung up on the individual salvation. Some people get hung up on what my personal relationship. No, that's not what is let the peace of Christ rule in our hearts. We're called into one body. We do this together. We are, if you're going to tell this story, we can't be non-communal. We do it together. We teach and admonish, anchored in the story of God's love and peace. We sing about what God is doing and has done in our psalms, our hymns, our spiritual songs. But here it is. Here is the anchor. If you don't remember anything else, here it goes. But more than all that, More than all that, the one thing that will make our virtues and practices automatic, consistent, and even easy is love. If indeed it feels as if the church is suffering from narrative collapse, that it has lost its connection to the story of salvation, liberation, and the reign of God, the highest virtue that can bind us together, the animating virtue around which we can come together and stay together, is love. And when we start wondering if we have lost the story, if there's any doubt about how this whole thing holds together, the apostle exhorts the readers to put on love. Only love binds everything together in perfect harmony. And so if the narrative is lost, then we know that we have failed to love. There is no collapse in this story as long as love is the highest and supreme virtue for the people of God. The late, great William Sloane Coffin said it the way I love it. Love is our business. If we can't love, we are out of business. I'll say it this way. Love is our story. If we can't love, we've lost the story. We've lost the story, the plot as a whole. The through line from God's definitive entrance into time and history up unto this present moment of life and existence, the connective force emanating from the heart of God is love. And no matter what other theologies or theories find expression in the religious marketplace, no matter how important the philosophical questions are, no matter what new questions arise and new narratives compete for our attention and adherence, love is the story of our faith. Love is our story. And it must be said, unfortunately, for many in the world, the church has not reliably loved, nor forgiven, nor shown compassion, kindness, humility, meekness, and patience. And people have gotten that story. Some people, unfortunately, can't find the plot in the story we're telling. And so we must gamble on love. We must gamble on love as the way to bind it all together, to let the world know how this thing holds together. Yes, this nation may be suffering from narrative collapse. Our political ideologies may be competing for narrative primacy. The stories our culture tells may not make sense to us anymore. But if the church is to recover its story and thus its mission and identity, then we must put on love. And if the reign of God means anything, if God's connection to us as God's chosen, holy, and beloved really does describe who and whose we are, if beloved community is to mean if it is a real state of our gathered existence, it must be because of the binding power of love. And then the world will know the story we're telling. Clothed in compassion, kindness, humility, meekness, and patience, we become the vanguard of an advancing movement of love in the world, binding everything together. May it be so. Amen.
Please join me in the spirit of prayer. God of beginnings and endings, and of all the moments in between, we give thanks for your constancy even when we choose not to acknowledge your steadfastness. We come into your presence as fickle creatures and confess that our love for you and for our neighbor vacillates between extremes. One day we are filled with zeal and dedication. The next we are apathetic. One week we can be gracious and understanding. The next we are reactive and impatient. Forgive us, Holy One, and open our hearts to a continuum of consistent love for you, for others, for ourselves. You are already aware of our own irony, gracious God. For while we ourselves are so malleable, we often resist changes happening around us. It unsettles us to have things not always be as they have always been. Some of us actively resist plans to shift, modify, or move on. Help us to feel secure even when much of what we have relied on is transforming into something else. Give us the courage to face the future unafraid. While we continue to grapple with the loss that this pandemic has laid bare before us, soothe the hearts of those who grieve and help us to center in hope that what is now will not always be. Some of us press for change all the time because we are frightened. We want some novelty to distract us from problems we do not wish to confront, from memories too painful to endure, from a deep inner emptiness that has us running scared. We look to calm our restless hearts by never standing still, by taking on too much, by living in constant motion so as to not have to face the realities of our life. Call us to quiet, O God, and invite us to know your peace. For in that knowledge is the freedom from fear and the strength to confront the complexities before they consume us. Help us to remember that all change is both loss and gift. Remind us that in the letting go there is the opportunity for something new. Help us really see situations of anguish and injustice and embolden us to stand up rather than step back. May we not become so consumed with the change in our own lives that we neglect the suffering of others. God, may your grace fill the spaces in between each one of us so that we might lean into you rather than feel isolated and alone. And always, may love be both our anchor and our guide. Amen.
Beloved, go throughout your day and your week, remembering who and whose we are. Put on compassion, kindness, humility, meekness, and patience. Put on love, for it binds everything together in perfect harmony. And we affirm that by reciting together our covenant benediction. We covenant with you, O God, and one with another, and do bind ourselves in your presence to walk together in all your ways, according as you are pleased to reveal yourself to us in your blessed word of truth.